It is the skate that was designed, I think, to replace the Rollerblade Tempest. It comes in either the 3x125 12.6 inch 3-wheel drive frame, or the same frame but with 110mm wheels on it, or there's another shorter frame. I think it's 11.6 inch in the 3x110. That's an excellent frame. I use it on quite a few different skates. It's still what the Rollerblade Speed team use. Yeah, good frame. Initially, I loved it. It was very stiff, responsive, comfortable. It was a huge step up from a Rollerblade Tempest, which was quite didn't have a lot of ankle support at all, or support in general. Your foot would roll within the skate. This is the total opposite. It's very much closer to what a speed skate would be. It has a unique function of having a cuff that moves but can be removed by just undoing the cuff bolts, and then the cuff comes off, and then you've got a speed skate, sort of. I skated these skates for several months before I couldn't ride them anymore and had to modify them heavily to try and get them to fit my foot. After having someone work on them and try and change them several times, eventually I gave up and we'll be putting them up for sale. Compared to a Rollerblade Tempest, the toe is quite narrow in comparison, and that did cause issues for me. When I was getting them modified, one of the things we tried to do was heat it and push the toe out, and it did improve a little, but not completely. The other major problem with this boot is, I think it's trying to be a speed skate and a marathon skate in one boot, and mixing two different designs, and it just doesn't work, because what you have is a cuff that, when it pivots forward, the cuff, as it pivots forward, crushes down. So yeah, it'll cut across the top, between the top of the cuff, pretty much right in here, so between the top of the cuff and the top of the 3/4 strap. That once that bit there gets tight, it starts to cut down on top of your foot, and it's very uncomfortable. That came later, but before that happened, because the ankle part of the skate doesn't cup your ankle as well as a proper speed skate would, say for example a Blunt Jet, which I also have. I think what they've tried to do to compensate for that is have the skate cup your foot around here instead of at the heel. And I noticed that on the very first ride, because my heel would lift within the skate and I'd cause blisters. I sort of changed it a little bit and managed to fix that, but then over time, pretty much about 2 centimeters forward of the cuff rivet on both sides of the skate, there is the carbon base squeezes together to try and hold the front of your foot in, but that caused unbearable pain just underneath where that ratchet strap is. Now obviously I think in a speed skate it cups your heel, the support is in the heel and around the ankle bone, but in this, because it's trying to be a marathon skate and a speed skating one, they've put more of the pressure point forward of the cuff rivet, and you end up getting this really bad pain there. And funnily enough, it wasn't just me. This happened to a friend in Sydney, also has these skates, and he's had extreme problems in the exact same areas. I took them to a skate shop where they used a heat gun on each side and then put a vise in and try to widen apart too much around just forward of the cuff bolt on each side, or about here and here. So they've pushed that out. So that solved that part. We widened the toe, that solved that part, but then I'm still getting the problem of where the cuff as it goes forward, it puts a massive amount of pressure across the top here of your foot. Having since got Bont speed skates after this, I can see where the design sort of falls over, because a speed skate, you do it up to the top and it holds your foot in place. With this, if you were to take the cuff off, which I've done, I've skated them without the cuff, they don't quite do up as snug around the top of your foot. If you want to skate them well, then you have to put the cuff back on, but then because the boot doesn't come up tight on the top, you end up doing the cuff up very tight, and then as that cuff is now very tight to hold your ankle in place, as it rocks forward, it starts putting huge pressure on the top of your foot, and then you're back to a catch-22. I don't know, maybe it's my foot. Myself and another friend who has the same skate have almost exactly the same problems in the same area. If you have, it's a narrow design, so if you're a wider foot person, I don't think you've probably got more chance of having problems. But let's look at the rest of the boot. Carbon fibre base, the air sort of comes in through a little pocket here, and then should go up through the cutting in the base. Oh, it's actually under there, the cutting, and then into the boot. Good idea in theory, but I don't think much air actually makes it through there. If anything, most of the air comes through the mesh. Yeah, it looks amazing though. I love the look of it. I just wish it worked, because I'll see these on the shelf or in the cupboard and really want to skate them, but I can up to maybe 20 or 30 kilometers, but I've done 100 kilometers in these skates in one skate, and I was sore for days. So yeah, they've since become not my favourite skate to skate long distance in. The materials, the stitching, the gluing, the workmanship is excellent. I think these were going for about $500 US in the States. I think they've come down a little bit since. I think it's a good price for what it is. There's a lot of work in that boot. There's a lot of craftsmanship. Does have a little bit of impact absorption in the inner sole that's in it. So it's not too rough a ride. The buckles, the bolts, the laces, everything's kind of standard rollerblade, pretty good quality. Doesn't look like it's going to fall apart anytime soon. Yeah, so if you have a thinner, more narrow foot, and you don't want to go to a speed skate, and you want to move up to something that's maybe better than a street skate for a marathon or that sort of work, this is a good alternative. But do test it in the shop first, because if you're getting a pressure, if you feel like it's grabbing you forward of the rivets, I'd probably avoid it, because that's how I felt. And then over time, as I started skating them more and more and more, that grabbing became a major issue, and I couldn't skate them anymore without major modification. Unfortunately, these aren't heat moldable. If you are to try and heat them using a heat gun, or try and modify them yourself, if you break it, or it's not covered by any kind of warranty. Yeah. The Rollerblade Tempest went for a long time. I think it was around for maybe 7 years. This is its final replacement. I don't know how long we're going to keep this going. I've noticed a lot of shops, the prices are dropping, so maybe they're not selling well enough, or people aren't finding them comfortable. So I'm hoping sooner rather than later, Rollerblade go back to the drawing board and just either try not to go with the 2-in-1 skate, just go back to a comfortable marathon skate like the Tempest, or as comfortable at the Tempest, but with the support that this gives, and then have their speed skates as a separate range. And if they do, I'll buy one, because I love rollerblade gear. Always have, always will. Thanks.